All right. Hello, hello, everyone. Happy Friday. I am super excited to launch my first collaboration now themed series. And today we're going to be talking about empathy, but I want to share a little bit with you as to why we are covering this subject. I have been really in, I would say, in great introspection as to how we can address a lot of these hard conversations when the world is and has been quite polarized. Um, I think there's just so much going on in terms of, um, really just discrimination, and I've always wondered, what can I do? What's my part in all of this? And I still don't know. So what I've done is I'm asking for some advice from some people who are doing really great things in their communities and their workplaces. They're consulting with different companies. They are sharing advice to teams, high performance teams, as to how to collaborate better, how to just show up fully and respect one another. And I think I have a really great roster of people coming up. We're going to make sure we get our first guest here in shortly. Um, but we're going to make sure she gets in properly. Let's see. Yeah, we're gonna really do an awesome series here when we get everybody going. So, um, we may have to flip around some of our series here on our schedule, just because I learned that we're having a little bit of a technical difficulty. We got people in the background getting excited. Um, but what I do want to do is share that I am, you know, if you guys haven't noticed, I'm a woman of color, and it's really difficult to have these conversations about empathy, specifically around diversity and inclusion at work. It's almost taboo to engage in this discussion, and I feel like I'm really blessed to have had an opportunity to join a company to work on my day job outside of constructor at American Family Insurance, where I really feel accepted. I really feel comfortable. I really feel comfortable to express myself, express who I am, and show up fully. And I think that's encouraged all the way down from executive leadership. So I'm just super excited to be in that kind of environment while at work. But I still don't know what the steps are, and I wanted to talk with some experts about what those tools are. And fortunately, we do have our first guest ready and set up to go. So I'm going to do a quick introduction here before we engage in our first conversation. Our first guest is Dr. G. She is the Vice President and of Diversity and Inclusion of Flatiron Construction and Links JV Inclusivity Manager. Dr. Brassfield, commonly known as Dr. G, serves as the Senior Supplier Diversity and Community Inclusion Officer for Flatiron Construction as the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion, and also serves as the Inclusion Manager for Links JV on the Los Angeles World Airports Automatic People Mover APM project. She assists the Southwest District Manager and the Division Manager in meeting contractual requirements on current projects and upcoming projects pursuits that engage women, diverse businesses, local workforce, and youth management. She's a true advocate, leader, and change agent within construction who is passionate about inclusion of others within construction and construction-related trades. So without further ado, we're going to bring Dr. G on. Hi, Dr. G.
Hey, good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Oh, I am good. How are you doing?
I am adjusting Well, I'm so thankful that you invited me to participate in today's conversation, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing out there just to make sure that more and more people are informed and educated about so many different facets that can improve their own self. So I'm adjusting because it's still all too new, and every day I'm learning something new about myself and this whole personal journey in the new.
Yeah. Yeah, I love your artwork there that says take chances. You know,
Reminder.
I think we're all in this world of having to navigate through uncertainty right
Yeah.
now. And we have to take chances. We have to almost deliberately choose to fail. So I love that artwork because we just got to work through these blunders. Got to figure it out.
Inspire. Inspire, right?
Inspired too. Yep. Yep. All right. So with that, thanks for sharing a little bit about who you are and that you're adjusting. We touched base a little bit earlier today, and we talked about maybe some of us need a little bit of a vacation because it's crazy. But before we get into your personal journey here, and some of the things that you might be digging into to improve, your life, as it relates to connecting with diverse groups, we're going to jump right into this question: how do we create empathy in a distant society? What are your thoughts on that? How do we facilitate that?
I think that conversation is always evolving, right? Because now you have to deal with not only the distant society, but each personality and each learning style. So for me, what's helpful for me is that education, starting with understanding and putting myself in someone else's position. For example, I was talking to one of my fellow colleagues, and I was like, I have this to do. And I was like, I lean on my family for support to help me be that mom role and balancing everything that I have to do. And so she asked me to stop, press pause, and think what it's like to be my mom and having to juggle the day to day with the making sure my son supported, making sure he's in his class, learning what he needs to learn, and also balancing my father. So for me, it was just that education, like, wow, you're right. Because we don't take time enough to think about how the other person's impacted and all that they're balancing, all that they have going on. And so these kind of conversations where you're able to step back, reflect, and then be able to really assess and help the other person, I think that's how we grow together as a group.
Yeah, there's a interesting approach to how you talk about introspection for yourself first.
Mhm.
And you really have to know deeply and almost put yourself in the other person's shoes before you can educate. Um, you know, you're talking about your family dynamic. How does this work in work for you? How do you help facilitate those kind of discussions at work?
Wow. That same conversation, the listening and the learning, right? Especially when it comes to more of these diversity and inclusion and belonging type of conversations, is really starting with the foundation of, okay, let's figure out how we can do listening. For example, our CEO for Flatiron Construction had the opportunity when faced with change and more of this diversity and inclusion space, is he took on a listening tour throughout the whole company and wanting to understand what the problems, what the issues were, what are the, how can we be a better inclusive organization, and what does it look like in a transformative type of industry, meaning the now with all this pivoting, the virtual platforms. And so from there, we're able to look strategically at how do we not only recruit, retain, grow, but also our business strategy of how to be a better organization. So it's these kind of conversations that are happening for us internally. And then also when we're talking about just going out to the community, having that foundation for understanding. For example, on the Links Automated People Mover project, which is that joint venture comprised of Balfour Beatty, Dragados, and Flatiron and Floor. And so as we have the inclusivity efforts under this particular joint venture team, we're listening to the workforce, hearing about how there's a need in the local community for more resources, for more training, for more engagement on this particular project. And we're partnering. So it's that conversation that creates the foundation for understanding, the empathy, and also those resources that we're able to filter back in the project. And we have an amazing job coordinator on this particular project that we have a chance to work with to make sure that we are at the forefront of change. And her name is Pam Penn with PDA Consulting. She's amazing. And she's a great expert and a resource, but it's that empathy, because I don't claim to know everything, but what I do claim to do is know or find those resources that are out there that can help me connect and educate myself of how being a better resource in the space of D&I.
Yeah. Do you have specific resources that you lean on particularly?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not only my team. So I have an amazing team for the Links Automated Joint Venture project, but also the resources and the community benefits programs that are out there, those resources that are able to provide various workforce initiative supportive services, or even small business resources. And even our new pipeline that we've taken on is youth engagement, because we identify that there's a huge pipeline of people that are retiring in the near future. But what does it look like as far as engaging more young adults and seeing, right, what they can become? Because a lot of us don't know what we don't know. So how do we make sure that we are engaging more, like Compton Unified, Inglewood Unified, various school districts that are heavily saturated with more minority populations, making sure they're engaged in construction earlier on so that they can see in order to become.
Yeah, and you know what? That's what we talked about when you and I happened to have been on the Construction Progress Coalition panel. I think it's a little over a month ago. So shout out to Nathan and the Construction Progress Coalition. I think Sasha Reed has also participated in pursuing this conversation on behalf of CPC. And I think it, to your point, showing up and being yourself and allowing people to see the diversity in the work population, so that there is encouragement for students, for people of color to just see themselves in an opportunity.
At all levels.
I think that's great.
At all levels. That's the biggest thing, because usually we see one focus within construction, right? The job site, which is great. That's how the work is built and that's how it's done. But there's so many other positions that you can go into as a young potential inspiring, adult to go into construction, from design, construction, pre-construction, surveying, analysis. There's so many different roles and there's a need.
Yes, that's excellent. And I think I really like the part about just being there, being close to the individuals who you want to influence. That's the part that I've been hearing is really beneficial for people to do, being proximate. And it's difficult to do that in this distant society. What does that mean when we're in the Zoom world for you?
It's a lot more time. I think from my perspective, when it comes to engagement and inclusion in regards to construction projects, is making sure we are very transparent in our intentions, meaning that we are building these relationships. We have a three-pronged collaborative approach. We listen to the community, listen to our partners. We learn, because we're not perfect. So we're trying to learn how to build these relationships. And of course, we're looking to partner. So there's that three: listen, learn, build. And so that's everything we do as far as moving forward. And then also just really being the authentic self, right? Yeah. Because my passion is to make sure that I have maximum inclusion on this particular project. And I have the platform and the supportive assistant from my organization, such as Flatiron, to make sure that we're maximizing, making sure we're out there at the forefront of how do we engage more diverse certified firms or diverse workforce in our projects. So I have that support from our executive team. So it's a great opportunity, especially for the now. Here we are at this point where there's not only, the industry is changing, but it's a requirement to change.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So I promised I would ask you about how you're doing that personally. So, and you touched on it a little bit, but please just share, what do you do in your daily life? What do you do to collaborate? Or to recalibrate here so that you can show up fully, within your personal relationships and just coming to work?
I think when we spoke this morning, I was working out, right? So every single morning, I take my own personal time for me, just for me, and that's my workout time. I get up about 4:30 Pacific Standard Time, Pacific Day like that, and get up and work out. So from 4:30 to about probably 6 o'clock is my time just to focus on the workouts, and it's just amazing transformation. And then if I have time, I might get a jog in, depends on. But I like to lift the weights, do the cardio, and just clear my mind
That's
and practice
excellent.
breathing, even breathing, just sitting there and thinking about nothing, just really focusing on the breathing and the intent.
That's so good. Thanks for that nugget. Oh my goodness. So I think we're at our 10 minutes and I'm looking for our next guest here. It may take a little bit for her to chime in, but thank you so much, Dr. G. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
all of
Honor.
the value that you're doing at Flatiron, that you're doing on the project, your intentionality, how you show up. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Hey. So we are really excited to be here with you today. We just had an amazing speaker, Dr. G. She is really dynamic, really exciting, and I think she's doing some really great work. I am really happy that we're having this conversation about empathy again, so important. And I want to go ahead and share a little bit about our next speaker. And she's actually the one who inspired me to do this event in the first place because of the work that she's been doing in organization culture change. She's actually a dear friend of mine, and I've known her from childhood, and she is really the kind of person that really just goes deep on how do we have the right conversations with the right people at the right time in order to engage in these deep conversations around who we are, identity. How do we understand identity? How do we understand the different parts of ourselves? So we can get into these deep philosophical conversations regularly. And every time we talk, it ends up being like a 3-hour conversation, I find. But I'm super proud of what she's been able to achieve. So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick introduction for her. Because, again, as a childhood friend, sometimes you don't think about the things that people are doing to impact in their environments, but I think she's doing a really strong impact to a number of organizations right now as a consultant. So Eliana Dennis is the managing director of Axia Amplified Consulting. Her professional experience spans across tech, nonprofits, legal, and educational sectors, where she uses research to base change management approaches to design value-aligned organizational systems and cultures. She serves on the HR committee for the Chicago Freedom School Board of Directors. In 2019, she was a Chicago Women in Philanthropy Emerging Leaders Fellow and currently serves on the CWIP Racial Equity Committee. Between 2016 and 2019, she served as the Race Equity Oversight Committee Chair at the Shriver Center on Poverty Law, where currently she serves as a senior affiliate consultant and as faculty for the Racial Justice Institute. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and bring on Eliana Dennis. Welcome, Eliana.
Hi, so glad to be here.
Oh, excited to have you finally on the Constructor brand. We're doing collaboration now. It's our first series. I'm excited you're part of it.
Yes, I'm excited to be here.
And then thanks for all the inspiration for the idea and helping with planning of it. First and foremost, how are you doing?
Today's a good day. It's Friday. I can't complain. I really can't. I'm here. Life is happening. Everything's good.
Good. It's been 2020. It's been a roller coaster year. Okay. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're having this conversation. We have to, again, address how we show up and identify as ourselves. But in that, we have to decide then, how do we show up and how do we create empathy in this distant society that we're in? So, you do consultancy, you are teaching organizations how to do this. Can you share a little bit about what your approach is to facilitate these types of conversations?
These are not easy conversations to have. It can be really tough. But when we're trying to create empathy, I start by acknowledging that that's scary because we don't always know where that vulnerability and where that openness is going to take us to. But the beauty of empathy is that it has this power to usher us into this experience that's bigger than ourselves, right? And so when I'm facilitating a conversation or if I'm just participating in a conversation and I want to participate in a meaningful way, I try to start by sparking curiosity. Curiosity is so powerful. I mean, just think about it. If you're going to carve out a little bit of your time to pay attention to someone, let's say you're just like walking down the streets and you see a person who appears to be homeless, you could say, I'm busy and going on with my day. Or you could stop and be curious. I wonder if they're hungry. I wonder if they're cold. I wonder how they got there. I wonder if they have family. There's a level of respect that comes just from positioning yourself as a curious person. But at the same time, like, it's not like curiosity is like the super secret, right? Because you can be curious and you can allow that to loop you right back into your way of seeing things and doing things. And you don't have to let that take you into a new worldview or to a new perspective. But you can do that at the same time. So conversations where you ask people, have you ever thought about, or what do you think it's like for, or why do you feel this way? Why do you think this way? Where did that come from? Where did that start? And just helping people begin to explore with curiosity. You can be intentional about driving them towards trying to be curious about ways they might have points of commonality, or driving them to be curious about ways people are different and try to find things about those differences that they appreciate. And that can really be a powerful starting point.
Wow. It's so simple yet so profound. Just really going down the path of being curious. And I like what you said about asking those questions of another person so that you can inspire curiosity, but also look at the differences, but look at the commonalities. I think that's truly powerful too.
Yeah, it can be. And, oftentimes it's not just about what you're trying to spark in someone else. It's also helpful in those conversations if you start with that for yourself. Because when you're listening to someone and they say something you don't like or that rubs you the wrong way, it can be easy to like shut down and like get locked into your way of feeling and interpreting. But if you pause and say, I wonder, even while you're listening, that can be powerful to keep you engaged too. We need that.
That's so real. We gotta fix our alarm here. 1 second.
Okay, go ahead. Take your time.
Here we go. We're back on. Technical difficulty averted. Oh man. It's Friday, it's 2020. What's the worst that could happen? we gotta think about what's the best that can happen. And that's why we're having these conversations about how to collaborate and how to have empathy, because that's something that's what I find is probably the biggest challenge. Oh, and you know what? I'm reminded it's also Friday the 13th. So let's not think about the worst that could happen. Let's think about the best that can happen. Yes. Yeah. So to continue the conversation with you, Eliana, we've talked about this from a facilitation perspective, but how do you personally now think about your own development? How are you thinking about how you can engage into, more empathetic conversations, especially in this distant society, so that we can stay connected and continue to collaborate? How does that show up in your life personally?
How do I try to grow and develop when we're not able to connect in the ways we used to?
Yeah.
When life gives you lemons, you gotta make lemonade. So since I can't be out and about in the world the way I used to be, and maybe meeting people in the same ways, I say if you can't go out, go within. This is a great opportunity to do the inner work we need to do so that when we're on the other side of this, we're better for it and we're ready for it. And I think of like your intercultural development is a bit like therapy. You know, you think it's about sitting on the couch and having a hard conversation, and then you get there and they're like, read this book, do these reflective writings, try out these activities, watch these videos, maybe join this group online, you know, and so that you get these new ways, or you're exposed to new ways of thinking and of being and of communicating and making sense of your world. And so this is the internet age. It's 2020. You don't have to leave your house to broaden your horizons. You can do that from home. There are so many resources. You know, there's movies, shows, documentaries on Netflix. You can go on YouTube and Google new concepts. You can read a book, you know, Trevor Noah, Born a Crime. Like, you can learn so much at home. And so that when those opportunities to connect show up, you're doing it from a more aware space. And you got some things you're curious about, and we can practice when we get those chances. But in the meantime, do the work within.
I like that a lot. That's really fresh. You know, I think we're in this Zoom fatigue world, whether it's Zoom or Teams or whatever it is. We're always on calls, and you know, and we have to manage our time. We have to manage our mental energy, our physical energy. We have to manage these things. Do you have any specific things that you do to kind of manage yourself?
Oh, specific thing, you know.
Just give us one thing that you help to kind of manage your energy, mental, physically, or whatever.
Yeah, I think the truth is that these are really tough times. And sometimes I don't cope well. And the reason is because subconsciously, you know, I have this belief that the best way to cope is to stay, you know, unemotional, stay productive, stay functional, because that's what our culture teaches us. Like, you're okay as long as you're still functioning, you're still doing. But I have found that since that's not working super well, I just recently noticed that when I am coping well, it's because I made a choice to prioritize what's meaningful over what's urgent. And so that might look like I'm going to wake up and I'm going to pray instead of ruminating over my to-do list as soon as I wake up. Or I'm going to take 30 minutes to talk to my best friend instead of 30 minutes to answer all these emails that are never, ever going to stop anyway. I'm going to take a walk instead of working through my lunch break. I'm going to sit down with my family for 40 minutes instead of, you know, spending that extra moment perfecting this pitch for a client or a proposal. And it's not like I always make those choices, but I give myself permission to do it because I know that, you know, I'm doing the work where I want to help human beings treat other human beings with dignity. But how can I do that if I'm not giving myself permission to be kind and gentle and generous with myself? And so that's my birthright and that's my responsibility. And so,
mic drop.
Yeah,
I think that's excellent. Oh man, I'm so happy to have you on. I feel like, you know, since we're at time, we have to extend this conversation. I talked about a little bit earlier that we can have 3-hour-long conversations. This is
we
so
can.
Just do. But thank you so much, Eliana. Thanks for blessing us with your thoughts, your ideas, your suggestions on how we can create more empathetic environments.
Thank you for having me. This has been great.
Thanks.
All right.
So we are going to move on to our next guest. Also a dear friend, one that I've actually met through the lean construction community. His name is Felipe Engineer Manriquez. He is an international lean speaker, a serial entrepreneur. Felipe is committed to lean practitioners and with 2 decades of construction industry experience. He's also an active contributor and member of the Lean Construction Institute and is an approved instructor and facilitator. So with that, we're going to bring Felipe on. Welcome, Felipe.
Hey, Brittany, how's it going?
Oh, it's going well. And you know what I didn't mention? Felipe has a podcast.
Yeah, you did. And my favorite part of what I do is I'm a respect for people enthusiast, Brittany, as you know.
Yes!
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yes. So tell us, how are you doing, Felipe?
I am struggling like everybody else. And that's exactly where I want to be. I want to be in it. So every day is not perfect. Every day is a challenge and something new. And I work with quite a few people in and around the construction industry. So there's a lot of people in the same boat. And that's when you sent me the note on what this was going to be about, I said, yes. I barely even stopped reading it to the last sentence. Yeah, I became my own, what I always say, that people don't have a lot of time to read, but it was so short. It was just a sentence. And I thought this would be really good to share and hear from other people too. I've been listening to the previous guests and it's been inspiring. So thank you for putting this together.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited about what I'm going to learn and what this can turn into, because I don't think it stops here. You know, I mentioned earlier that we are doing a Collaboration Now series. So we're going to be having conversations about how we can continue to collaborate every other week on Friday at this time. So, you know, I'm really excited to have you on, Felipe, and I think you have such a great perspective. I'm going to jump right into the question: how do you facilitate creating empathy in a distant society?
Okay, so the where I start with is just like Eliana said, start within. And I thought and reflected on this when the pandemic first hit. How is this going to change how I work? And what's going on in where we are in the United States and in the world too? We're seeing things that we've never seen before. And I thought connections make my experiences better. And that's where I started from. So when things happened, I was able to pivot right away because feeling with people is something that I know from my own experiences definitely had massive impact on me. And luckily for me, I got into Brene Brown like 7 years ago. And I wanted to share my favorite of all time Brene Brown quote. And I'll just put it there on the screen so people can read it. And that's what is exactly resonated with me. And when I heard her say it in her talk about the power of vulnerability, I thought the best experiences in my life have not always been thought of as the best experience while I was having it.
Mm.
And the cool thing is with people, you get some different perspective. And with people that you trust, you know that you're in a caring environment. And the difference between empathy and sympathy, and I think I used to confuse it way long time ago, but thank you, Brene, for helping me understand the difference. Empathy connects. You have to be in the person's shoes. You have to put yourself in their place. That means that something inside of you knows what they're going through. Whereas sympathy is you're giving someone pity or you're feeling sorry for them. And I've got a story to tell about that. But when I thought about this, getting ready for this talk, I remember, what Brene taught in that power of vulnerability speech.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, you have to be able to recognize the other person's truth and their emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And both of those together. And in the construction industry, often emotions are like there's no emotions in construction. Like there's no crying, there's no emotions, right? We just go to work and do the job. And that's far from the truth. I can't tell you how many times people have broken down and been real. And it's been for the better. It's made people tighter and closer together. It's made project teams work better together when they see, oh, the leader of the project is struggling too. It's not
Right.
just me, right? It's not
Right.
just me. The part that Brene also brought, and this was research based on, I believe it was a woman that was studying nursing fields and other care fields where care was like critically important to the job. She said, you can't judge. So if you're in a situation where someone is, being emotional or struggling with something, you can't judge. And if you put yourself in their place, you're there with them. So how do you treat yourself? I think one of your previous guests, it might have been Dr. G, was talking about, what she does for her own self-care so that she's ready. And you're going to have Rex on later. I don't want to steal any of his thunder, but Rex is like famous in my mind for telling people the importance of sleeping. If you're like in my own family, they know that there's two types of us, right? Yeah, you're tracking it. There's two me's. There's the well-rested me and there's the lack of sleep me.
Oh my goodness.
You don't want to see the lack of sleep me. Like they know. And then the third thing that I learned from Brene, and again, 7 years ago, wisdom that's still true today, even with all the things that are happening. She said, you have to communicate that to the person you're with or the group of people you're with. So one of the examples I want to share was like in a big group setting, oftentimes project teams bring me in to facilitate and do like a pull planning session using Last Planner system production controls, or a Scrum session more recently, get to use Scrum with project teams. And what I do is I have to first understand like, who am I talking with?
Yes.
What's their state of mind? And then quickly connect. And it could be like 10 people, 30 people. I've had as many as 50 people, and make those connections with each of them individually and not think of them as a big group, like a one mass thing, because they're not. They're all individuals. They just so happen to be working on this project.
Mm-hmm.
And when I do that and approach it that way, I get different results than when I tried doing it the other way, which I learned a decade ago. Like, don't one size fits all is not right. And the same is true, especially with creating empathy and connections with people. You have to connect with them right where they are, at the moment they are, for exactly what they need, and don't put yourself in it. So, a story I want to share quickly. A friend of mine I had met earlier this year, or no, before the pandemic hit. So we met in person, and they were in one of the sessions where I was just creating awareness around a lean methodology. And the person was in the room like this.
Change.
Arms,
just yeah.
with arms crossed.
Rejecting the idea, body language. Yeah.
And I looked at the person and I said, I need to talk to you. Like, when this is over, I'm going to come and talk to you. So don't leave when this is over. And so we talked afterwards. It was over, and they were expressing doubt. And how could this work? How could this thing that we're showing actually work? Even though the session was hands-on interactive and people can get their hands dirty with what we were doing. And I said, the change has to happen here.
Uh-huh.
So if you don't think it can work, it won't. I was like, let's go. We can always go somewhere. And then I said, I don't even want to convince you. I don't even want to convince you. If you're getting the results you like with what you're doing and your teams and people, don't change a thing. Teach me what you're doing. But if you're dissatisfied, which it looks like you are, you've been frowning for an hour and a half, just thinking like this is too hard. I said, that's why we're talking now. And that ended up turning into a mentoring relationship.
Wow.
Where now that person and I, and it was voluntary. It wasn't like I forced myself upon them. So that created further conversations and dialogue. And then probably by the second or third conversation, Brittany, they opened up and they told me this like scarring experience that they've had in our industry. I mean, it was like one of the worst stories I'd ever heard. And I saw myself in that story.
Wow.
And I said, and when the person was telling me, I listened and made the space and paused. And when they were sharing some of the very hurtful things that they experienced, like within the last 12 months, even, they'd had a series of bad things happening over the course of a decade. And even just 12 months ago, people had lied to them, in our business, and they were dealing with, how do I navigate? How do I trust again? Because all I see is this pattern of people being dishonest. And I didn't give any advice. I remembered what Brene said: don't judge, communicate, connect, don't solve the problem. And I just paused and I listened. And the person even said, aren't you going to tell me what to do? I said, heavens, no, no way. I said,
Oh,
what I will
man.
do, if you're interested, I'll share a story of something that happened to me. And I said, but not to tell you what to do or to do what I did, but just to show you, like, you look at where I am now. And I went through that myself 12 years ago, and I'm still here.
Wow. Felipe, you're another one that we could do a long form podcast with. I know you have long form too.
Yeah.
Um,
There's no limit to how long my show can be.
I tried to go around that 45-minute mark, but sometimes it gets up there. But yeah, I mean, I think you dropped a ton of nuggets. Can you throw that quote, your favorite quote of Brené Brown again?
Yeah, for everybody, this is what Brené taught me.
Empathy fuels connection.
And it was coincidentally 2013.
2013. Man, it's timeless.
It's perfect.
Timeless.
Yeah.
So with that, Felipe, we have to move on to the next one. But thank you. We're gonna have to continue this conversation with you. All right, we'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.
So we're going to have Brent next. Brent Darnell, he is a best-selling author and leading authority in emotional intelligence. I've had him on the Constructor podcast. We've talked about emotional intelligence, and I've actually gone through the Geist EI assessment a couple of times, and we too were on the CPC Construction Progress Coalition D&I discussion a couple of times. So again, shout out to Nathan Wood, and we're excited that you have a new life in your family again. But with that, Brent, you are here. You're here to show up and tell us a little bit about what you know about how to facilitate and create empathy in this distanced society.
Well, what it's gotten down to, I've been doing a lot of work lately with diversity and inclusion and introducing it and furthering it in companies and organizations. And I've got an online course about it through CMAA. And I think the thing that really keeps resonating with everybody is your origin story. It's so connecting. And if you can take the time to, number one, understand what your origin story is, go back through your past and see maybe what was a challenging time for you and how did you overcome it. That's a good sort of way to frame it. And you can do it even in the context of diversity and inclusion if that's what you're trying to achieve. But what we found is everybody has that story. And if you can take the time to develop yours, and you can take the time to really be curious and not judgmental and ask others about their stories, those stories connect us. And they create this really safe space because everybody has struggles, everybody has things they've overcome, everybody has things in their lives that have shaped who they are today and their outlook on various, initiatives that we're trying to expand, and cultural changes and industry changes. And if we can take the time to listen, it creates this great connection and empathy.
So learn your origin story. So, we've been talking already a little bit about curiosity, and we've been talking about, reaching inward. How important are those things?
Well, since Felipe hit Brené Brown, I'm going to hit it a little bit harder.
Go for it.
She says that nothing ever that's heroic or life-changing or worthwhile ever happens without vulnerability. And see, this creates that vulnerability. And she gives the example of, like, if a Marine is going on a battlefield to grab an injured warrior, other Marine, to bring him back, and he's under fire, that's a heroic act. But if there was no fire and a guy was just out in the field somewhere and he just walked over and picked him up and brought him back, that's not a heroic act. So that guy has to be placed in a very vulnerable position to create that heroism. And I think the same is true for us in our, we don't have to be warriors on a battlefield, but it creates that same, the vulnerability creates that heroic action and creates that connection. And it's tough in the construction industry because nobody wants to be vulnerable. It's a real macho, tough guy kind of culture, and you can't be vulnerable, and you can't ask for help, and you can't be struggling. And so it's really tough for some of these folks to buy into. That's why I use the Marine special ops kind of, example, because I think they get that in a different way than they would if we were talking just about the psychology or the, behind empathy. I think it hits a little bit more home for them, for most.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that completely makes sense. When I first did the emotional intelligence assessment, one of my profiles came out as alpha, because I needed to, in my mind, at the time, I needed to be pretty much just a hard person, somebody who was very task oriented and almost demonstrative. And I think, to your point about vulnerability, that is so key, because that exposure there, man, just of understanding yourself and exposing yourself just a little bit, and coming to the table with that curiosity, man, it's so poignant, especially
Yes.
now in these times, right?
And you brought up a great point. It is slightly different for women in a male-dominated industry because it's so unfair. But a woman shows vulnerability, and well, she's weak, and she's a woman, and she's emotional. And a guy shows vulnerability, and he's the big hero dude. So, and the other thing is, I've coached a lot of women leaders in this industry, and sometimes they say, you know what, I need to hold on to that alpha. Without that, I feel like I'm not making the progress I need to make with my career and my life. And I tell them, then hold on to it. It's all about creating that balance. But sometimes I think women in this industry do need to err on that side of the alpha to be effective. So it's dicey because it ends up being, what's the culture of the project? What's the culture of the company? What's the personality and the emotional profile of each individual? So it gets real complicated, but we have to just stumble through and figure this out as we go and make mistakes and get uncomfortable, get comfortable being uncomfortable. I think that's the mantra for now, for COVID-19 and 2020.
2020, Friday the 13th. Here we go. What do you do personally, Brent? What do you give us one tidbit that you do to re-energize and or get yourself so that you can be in a place where you can facilitate these empathetic discussions?
Well, for me, it's yoga. I'm a certified yoga instructor. I've been doing yoga since the 70s. So I've been doing it a long time, yoga, meditation, mindfulness. And I have a morning routine of reading some Buddha quotes and some Rumi and some Yi Jing and some Bible devotional. And then, I try to do yoga at least 2 or 3 times a week. And that kind of keeps me sane. And then I try to do a meditation daily. Usually I end up averaging about 4 or 5 times a week, which is enough. But it's a pranayama, kind of deep breathing, different breathing exercises, meditation that really calms the mind and calms the nervous system. And we need that energy to be able to bring ourselves to these discussions and conversations. And, I tell people all the time, human connection is more important now than it's ever been. So it's about taking care of yourself first and then reaching out and helping to take care of others, because we do have the second highest suicide rate of any industry. And people that are struggling and have anxiety and depression, this is exacerbating it. So it's about really reaching out and having some frank discussions and really seeing how people are doing.
Wow. I did not know that stat, Brent. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing both about, how you recommend facilitating those empathetic environments, but also what you do to reset, reconnect. Those are very valuable. Thank you so much, Brent.
Thank you, Brittany. It's my pleasure.
All right, so we will be jumping into our next discussion with Rex Miller, author. Hey, I'm going to do a quick bio for you here, Rex, to introduce you. Rex Miller is the author of The Healthy Workplace Nudge, which I've read, Humanizing the Education Machine and Change Your Space, Change Your Culture. He's a speaker and consultant, and, he does very many things. I feel like I can't, do him justice with the list. But I will tell you that how I got introduced to Rex was, really a training about how to work in high performance teams. So with that, you have to understand team dynamic. You have to understand how to collaborate well. You have to understand empathy in order to engage in those things. So I think he's an awesome resource to tap into this discussion. So with that, welcome, Rex.
Thank you, Brittany.
Yes.
Well,
so how are you doing?
You're doing back to back. How are you holding up?
I'm doing good. I have my tea over here. I have my smoothie. I have some water here on the side. I have to figure out how I'm going to regenerate myself.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So on our side, life is good. March started out with 95% of all my engagements and clients canceling for 2020.
Wow.
So we reinvented, and it's been good. And what you see here with the studio is part of that pivot. And we're doing a lot of work with teams that, can't be face to face. And what it's showing is it's really exposing the misalignments that were already there, but now they're becoming even more exposed. So it's been an interesting time.
Yeah. So let's jump right into the question we've been asking everyone else. How do we create those empathetic environments, create empathy in this distant society?
Yeah, that's good. And those who know the Strengths Finder or the Clifton Strengths, it's interesting. There's 34 of them. Empathy is number 34 for me. Harmony is 33. And so the joke in the household is, Dad wants to care. He just doesn't. And so, and I think that kind of mindset also fits into the construction world and job sites. It's about getting it done. It's the get her done mentality and suck it up. But what we found, what we do is we begin all of our team sessions with a humanizing part. And we use a story template. And it was actually developed through our education work with a group called Journeyman Inc. And they work with at-risk kids. And they have a whole process. It's like a 4-year process where kids that come in who are really shut down or very angry, and the first thing to do is, how do you tell your story? So they create a very safe way of telling their story. And what we found is that the first part in creating a high-performing team is to see everybody as an individual and see them in a human nature. So we have what Journeyman Inc. calls this low-risk, high-value story template, and everybody fills it out. It is high energy. People get to know each other. Sometimes they'll post, use painter's tape and post their stories, and that's the first one. The foundation of it is we use the Clifton Strengths. Some people use DISC or others, but it's understanding how you are wired, appreciating how others are wired. And just as an example, there's more opportunities for us to disconnect than to come together, and just natural wiring. There are 33,600,000 different combinations of the top 5 strengths in Strength Finder. And then you add life experience and all of that. So to me, the question isn't why are we having trouble communicating? the challenge or the interesting thing for me is, how did the teams actually overcome all that? And then that comes to, and I've heard you having this discussion with some others, is that psychological safety. And Google says that's the number one criteria for a high performing team. And also what they call hedonic balance. And hedonic balance is that no one monopolizes the conversation. So a good manager, some people are naturally quiet and will be reflective and taking in, some are naturally outgoing. But having a balance where all the voices are in is one sign of an effective meeting. For those who know the Patrick Lencioni 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, we use that assessment. I'm currently on 2 teams now that are not getting along. So part of our job is to provide adult supervision for teams that can't get along and to teach everybody how to play well in the sandbox. So having these assessment tools, having people understand who they are at their best, that's that emotional intelligence piece we bring in through an evidence-based way. And, some of the teams I've gone to said, one of them said, we don't believe in any of this fuzzy-wuzzy, horoscopy, kumbaya, psychobabble bullshit. That was an example. And so we have to do a little bit of a magic trick. And the magic trick is say, okay, I don't know you, but let me take the profile and see if this is close. And so a few of those magic tricks, people buy in. Then they learn how to appreciate the difference in others. Then they learn where the trigger points are, the natural wiring. Then we begin to bridge the communication with common language. And then the beginning of the first part of trust, it just doesn't happen. You have to have some common features: humanizing story, common understanding, language, beginning to know each other. Then you can begin to build the elements of how teams perform, how they perform at their best, mostly how they perform under pressure. So we take them through all these different kinds of exercises for how are we going to respond under pressure before they go out into the construction world.
Right.
And you have something. If you don't practice and rehearse it, doesn't matter what you know up here. It's only what you practice and rehearse.
Yeah.
So that's some of what we do.
Man, that sounds like a huge toolbox of different resources that you can pull from. But I hear common themes. I hear getting your personal story, getting a good understanding of that personally. I hear making sure that you can communicate that, making sure that you have an assessment tool to kind of at least start having these conversations. Address the skeptics, right? I've been hearing that throughout this entire conversation, and it seems like you've been pulling a lot of those parts and pieces together, which is awesome. I do want to call out because you have inspired me to get the Whoop.
Yay!
Yep. And I think you posted earlier this week how bad your sleep was. Mine has been bad since the time change. But here we are. I made sure I got an extra hour in before hosting this, just so that I got in the green, and I did. But I did want to ask, how are you personally recharging, showing up so that you can help to engage and facilitate these empathetic and high performing team discussions?
Yeah. So when all this hit, it took me about a month to just go from the disequilibrium. The very first thing I did is got a daily routine. And it starts out in the morning with quiet, reflective time. I've been reading Ryan Holiday's book, Stillness is the Key. I do some meditation, some Bible reading, and I do a lot of listening. Then I journal, just capture the key thoughts. I then manage my energy, not my time. So I take the first hour or so during the day doing the most valuable things that I can be doing with my head. It's either creative writing, proposal writing, whatever takes high cognitive load. And so I got that from Cal Newport's book. And then through the day, I take breaks. So my meetings are typically only 45 minutes with a 15-minute break in between. So that's been built in. So instead of an hour, one of the posts last week showed that doing this virtual stuff, instead of using 20 to 30% of your calories, so it's all blood flow to the brain. And so that blood flow keeps your brain healthy, and it consumes 20 to 30% of your calories. Doing this, it's 40 to 50%. So
Wow.
just being aware that, and some days I'll take a power nap, no more than 25 minutes. 4:30, I cut it, and I go out and I hit some tennis balls against a wall. And then we have what we call a digital shutdown. So at 8 o'clock, we either put our blue blocker glasses on or we shut down completely, no digital stimulation before bed, to get that good quality sleep that the Whoop tells you need. Light dinner to help sleep. And I mean, it's scripted out, because without the normal structure that we had, what I found in coaching is that a lot of people are having the challenge because they just haven't reestablished a rhythm. They haven't gotten their structure, and they don't realize that this environment is wearing on you. I mean, people are sitting longer than they were at work.
Yeah.
I'm at a stand-up work surface, so mine is sit to stand. So just being intentional about your brain, what it takes to have a healthy brain, your body, and having a little bit of a sense of humor about all of this.
We have to, man. I tell you. Oh man, I've been making sure to have my at least my weekly intake of comedy just to keep things light, man. But I will tell you, I appreciate you. I appreciate the value you've been able to share. Again, you're another person we can go on a long podcast with, but this is just the beginning. This is not the end. We're doing collaboration now, a series, and we're going to be hosting these conversations every other week on Friday morning. So every one of my guests, you're more than welcome to jump in and onto our future conversations. And that includes you, Rex.
Thank you, Brittany. Take care.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I don't know about you guys, but I had an excellent time. And I'm not just saying that. I'm not just hyped up because I'm on LinkedIn Live, on YouTube Live, on Facebook. But I feel like I've been rejuvenated this morning by understanding some of the key structural elements of how to show up a little bit more authentically, how to show up in a way where I personally can start understanding myself better in order to engage in and facilitate more empathetic discussions when it's so needed right now. Again, polarizing times for so many reasons in 2020, whether it be COVID, whether it be the recent political events, whether it is the racial justice environment that we're in, the injustices that are taking place. There's so much. It's so heavy. And I feel it, and I think everybody feels it too. But in order for us to get to a point of moving to the next steps of creating the communities and creating the environments where we can interculturally develop ourselves in order for us to have more engaging conversations, intentional conversations, in order for us to make movements to do smart things within teams. We have to have these intentional conversations around empathy. We have to have these intentional conversations about how to collaborate better. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. I just so happen to be working in construction, and I touch real estate. I touch every part of it. But at the same time, it doesn't matter who you are. You can learn from this discussion. And I'm just so excited and happy to have had all of these amazing guests that we had today. again, I raised it a little bit earlier before Rex dropped off. I'm happy to continue these conversations, and I'm excited to, again, kick off our first day of collaboration now. With that, you guys enjoy the rest of your Friday, and we will catch you next time around.